we had talked to Maxwell Alexander Drake about this topic of the monomyth, Campbell's monomyth. And I asked him, like, can all the stories fit within the monomyth? He said, maybe. He said, maybe you could generalize all stories to some, sufficient level of abstractness that you end up with some type of form where all stories fall into. And maybe that's possible. So maybe it's true. But he said that he felt that by the time you did that, perhaps all of your explanatory power would be lost. Because, something that explains everything explains nothing. So if you actually did come up with, here is the theory that explains all story right here, maybe you don't have much explanatory power left. And so that's why I'm working under the assumption that maybe there are 6 to 8. I don't know. I'm pulling those numbers kind of out, like major story structures that we talk about, because that seems like, just because it seems like it's not one, so we're not overgeneralizing, but I'm also not telling you, hey, there might be 35, or 45 you got to deal with. What do you think about that idea, Chris?
Well, I go back to something you said, Heath, about interpretation, that you can interpret almost any narrative. You can cram it or fit it into a hero's journey form. You could also interpret as a Marxist interpretation that it's all economics, it's all power struggles, and have a perfectly valid theory of screenwriting that was based entirely on that and nothing to do with the hero's journey. You could interpret stories with your primary metaphor. Instead of the journey, it could be a baseball game. Every story is really a baseball game, and I could make that case. So, I think you're right that you run into some logical exhaustion or some walls when you try to do this. But I'll just give you one example from my own. When I encountered Campbell and Star Wars, I thought, goody, here we go, something for commercial work henceforth. But what about me? What about the artist? What about the burning passions within me and the desire to, shatter all these illusions of order and, be a pure intuitive artist? So I made as my thesis film a samurai movie, and that's all I had to hang on with. There'll be samurais, there'll be swords, there'll be costumes, and some kind of attempt at Asian sounding music. But the rest of it is going to be anti-hero's journey. No structure, no motivation, no clear resolution, no backstory, nothing that you would associate with a hero's journey. And I'm so proud of myself, made this, chaotic mess of a film. And I showed it to my fellow film students, and I was just stunned because they went, wow, it's amazing how with these crazy images, you were able to create a coherent hero's journey that had motivation, backstory. And we knew when he turned his head to look, he was looking at his dead wife and son who were killed by the villain. And, they put all this stuff back into it. So I think we're up against something that people are first, maybe. First, they are hardwired to it, to respond just like we did at the campfires, to enactments of these scenes, but then also we're acculturated to it because we've all, consumed thousands and thousands of stories that reinforce this, that there must be some reason for this, there must be some resolution, there must be some takeaway theme. So it's very difficult to escape that form unless you just want to make pure abstract chaos.
Well, I actually have a question.
Even then they're gonna try to impose that on a Rothko painting or the most abstract thing. They're gonna go, it looks like a tree to me.
Well, what's interesting, so that leads me to a question that we talk about here on the channel. One of the things that we've decided is a subversion of a theme sometimes is still hitting the theme. So sometimes by trying to avoid it or by trying to skip it, you are still including it. It's still casting a shadow into your story. So, and when you just said that I did everything to avoid every possible thing, and the audience was like, oh, we saw it all. It was still there. And you're like, that's impossible. So I wonder what you thought about that. Do you agree that the subversion of a theme still incorporates the theme in some way?
Well, I walked away from that experience appreciating the artists who are trying to do this, who are trying to escape. They're trying to shatter the forms that everyone expects. And I salute them and I give them a lot of credit, but they're kind of in a box because, as you say, all you can do is say, I'm not that, but then that is still there.
Yes.
So, so you're then playing with a deck of cards that says, there's no hero, there's no journey, there's no mentor, there's no special world, there's no motivation, and yet all those things are kind of measured by your mind as that's usually there, but it's not here. So, you haven't escaped. You really, you'd have to be really, really clever or bold in order to blast this thing to smithereens. And I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
Me too.
Popular commercial work that turn all this on its head without reference to it, and that's the hard.
That's
part.
the key. That's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.